We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H.
All right, let's get into the questions here. We're going to start with Infinite Gary. So everybody strap in. It's going to be a few minutes
it's
here.
Infinite questions from Infinite
Gary. Questions from Infinite Gary. So Infinite Gary has to say to start with, we're starting with A. We'll see what letter we end up at. I'm guessing G. That's just a guess. I have read all these questions, but whatever. I can't remember. The movie Dunkirk did not have an Atmos soundtrack for its theatrical release. Director Chris Nolan, or Christopher, I've never seen him referred to. I guess they're on first name basis. Anyway, Christopher Nolan has said during interviews that he isn't interested in using overhead audio, that he's even all that big on surround sound. But since audio Atmos is part of the Ultra HD Blu-ray specification, does that mean that the home release might include Atmos? Yeah, but probably not.
I guess there is a chance, but probably not. The clarification here is that the Ultra HD Blu-ray specification has mandated that all Ultra HD Blu-ray players are capable of sending an Atmos bit stream via HDMI.
Yeah, but that doesn't require that the disc have one on there in order to be put in there.
Yeah,
so.
it makes no mandate on what audio recording is on the discs themselves. It could be a mono track in PCM on an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc if a studio decides that's the audio track they want to include. There's no restrictions on that. So, there's absolutely no guarantee you're going to get Atmos with an Ultra HD Blu-ray. There are plenty of Ultra HD Blu-rays out there right now that just have, DTS HD master audio. They don't have Atmos or DTS X. So, yeah.
There's a real desire on my part to rail against this sentiment by, old Chris, I guess is what we're calling them these days. But I can't. And let me tell you why. The dude's got a lot on his plate. Realistically, think about, right now he's kind of the auteur, or whatever they call it. Everybody's like, oh, Christopher Nolan's going to make a movie. Everybody, give him all the money, right? And that, he can do, he's got so much stuff to think about. Surround sound, I can understand him saying that's the thing, that's the one's falling through the cracks. I got these lenses to worry about, these different cameras to worry about, the shots, the frames, the editing, the this, the that, the that, the that. Guys, something's got to fall out. Something's got to fall by the wayside, and it's going to be the sound. I care about the picture. Yes, it's very important to me personally, and more so than a lot of times the picture might be, especially with all the stuff he's doing, which I'm looking at going, why don't you just film it and just shut up about the film stuff? Just do it and make it sound and look good, and then be done with. But that's so I'm not going to rail against it. But there is a big part of me that's like, it just bristles at the idea that somebody doesn't care about surround sound. There's still people right now who are like, stereo, why don't we need more than stereo? Stereo images it can make a thing sound like it's coming from behind you if you use phase and stuff like that. Why do we need surround sound? They're not wrong, they're not right, but they're not technically wrong. I just think that they're not experienced enough. And so I'm gonna let this, I clearly did not let it go, but I am gonna let it go. Chris, you and I are still tight, all right? Call me. Sure. Gary is starting to feel the itch to upgrade his Runco projector in his dedicated theater. He is also interested in Dolby Vision, though. So do we think Dolby Vision is going to be added to projectors in the near future? I thought you said, let's be honest here, on this podcast that they can't do Dolby Vision on projectors because of the way Dolby Vision works, right?
Yeah, it seems unlikely because Dolby Vision relies on knowing pretty certainly how many nits you're seeing from a given display,
which you can't know from a projector because you don't know how far away it is. And I mean, I guess if it had some sort of light meter that you could.
Well, this is it. It's just there's a lot of variables because nits, the proper term for them is candela per square meter. So of course they don't know how many square meters you're dealing with because you might have a different size screen than somebody else. So you might be able to know the maximum light output of a given projector, but then you don't know what screen size is being used, and you don't know how far away it is, so you don't know how much of the zoom lens you're using, because the zoom lens tends to reduce the light output as you move the projector farther away. They don't know what lamp mode you're going to be using, although I guess they could just mandate that it goes into the high lamp mode. Then, of course, there's ambient light conditions, so they don't know what the black level is actually going to be. They don't know what the gain of your screen is going to be, whether you're using a gray screen or a white screen or a silver screen. There's a lot of variables. Now, could they set a bunch of parameters and say only an installer can install a Dolby Vision projector, and they must adhere to these parameters so that we know what the values of all these variables are going to be, or come up with some kind of menu interface that lets you enter all of these variables so that it can calculate. Yes, that is a possibility, but I really don't see them ever doing that at a consumer level, because I can't imagine they would trust a consumer buys a projector online and knows how to enter all of these parameters or adhere strictly to the things that they've set out in the guidelines. And that, because the last thing Dolby wants is someone to say, I bought a Dolby Vision projector and I didn't think the blacks were very good. And they're like, but you had sunlight streaming into your room and we told you not to do that, right? So
it's on your deck, dude.
Yeah. So it seems unlikely to me, unless it's going to be strictly a custom installer with some very specific gear.
You can still get HDR because that's an absolute value, right?
Yeah, HDR is static metadata. That just says what is the maximum light output of the entire movie, what is the average light output of the movie, and you, the display manufacturer, you go ahead and you mess with that however you want.
Right.
That's how HDR10 works. So HDR10 works on projectors right now. Dolby Vision, a little bit more strict. So I don't see it happening. Not for consumers.
He says, when it comes to upgrading displays, do we think it makes more sense to pay a lot to get the most cutting-edge display available, or only upgrade it every 5 or plus maybe years? Or would it be better to step down a model or two for a lower price, but be able to upgrade every 3 years or so? So if you buy the most expensive one, but you're going to have to live with it for longer, or you buy a cheaper one and live with it for less long. Well, if you're me, you buy the cheaper one and you live with it until that thing dies. I'll be honest, I have a really hard time getting rid of anything that's still working, and that's just me having 3 children and a mortgage and not fantastic job that makes me not want to spend any more money. I was at the store today. I'm like, oh, these steaks are on sale. They're still kind of expensive. I'm gonna have to let that go. I'm like, we have plenty of food at home right now, so I'm not in the same position that Infinite Gary clearly is. That being said, I have a real hard time paying premium for brand new cutting edge stuff because you just know in a year it's going to be much cheaper.
Yep.
And for me, I would rather get the step down and see how long it lasts, and just try to live with it for as long as I can. That would be what I would do.
Yeah. Particularly for projectors, like, for example, JVC, they do have their Blue Escient, right?
Right.
That's a genuine 4K panel. It's a laser light engine. Its black levels aren't even as good as their DLA projectors, but it can get brighter and it can fill up a larger screen. $35,000. Now, do you stretch yourself? Let's say you can afford it, but you really have to stretch yourself, and you're going to have to keep that thing for 10 years to amortize that price. Or you can go down to their $8,000 model, which, that's their E-Shift, the Wobble K,
right.
A regular lamp instead of lasers, but actually has better black levels, but just doesn't get quite as bright. It's like, that's a big delta in price, but if you can get the equivalent of that every 3 years versus, a minimum of 5 years with a $35,000 model, it's like, Tom's absolutely right. The $35,000 models in 1, 2, 3 years drop like a stone. The prices come down on those. So specifically for projectors, I really think it makes sense. When you see the newest thing, when Sony brought out their first 4K projectors, they were $50,000. And now you can get one that's essentially the equivalent. This is 2.5 years later for $10,000, right? So there's every reason in projectors to wait, because the newest stuff is really expensive and those prices drop quite. It's still too expensive for me at $10,000 or $8,000, but that's a huge price delta from $35,000 or $50,000.
Yeah. So he says since he'll probably upgrade his projector before he upgrades his processor, his AV processor, because I think his AV processor is real expensive, right?
It's an
got
Anthem.
The Anthem.
Yeah.
He's thinking an Anthem he's going to be able to live with for a while anyways.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking he'll have to send video from his Ultra HD Blu-ray player directly to the projector while using the second audio-only HDMI output of the player to send the audio to the processor. Does this invite the possibility of lip sync issues? Theoretically, no. In practicality, everything about HDMI invites the possibility of lip sync issues. You do not have to have two different cords coming out of your player to worry about this. Now, does it guarantee you're going to have it? No. Does it guarantee you're not going to have it if you only use one cable? No. So what do? You roll the dice. That's what I say. You just roll the dice. You have no control over this.
Most of the, especially upper end projectors right now, have really low input lag these days.
Yeah.
So right away you've got not very much lag on the projector side, not very much lag on the AV processor side. The likelihood of a lip sync error just from that is reduced. Before, we used to see long input lags on some displays. You'd see 200 millisecond plus input lags sometimes. Now we're seeing them down, below 30 milliseconds. It's getting infinitesimal. So the likelihood, if you get a decent projector with low input lag, of a lip sync issue, just full stop, is pretty low already.
But even if you get one, it's not like it's the end of the world. It's not like you've got this lag and now you're completely hosed. You can fix it. I mean, most of the time, the audio comes out first, and you delay the audio.
Yes.
Now, if the video comes out first, you are hosed.
Well, there's some tricks. There's some tricks you can do. Like, for example, if you turn on extra processing, especially frame interpolation, or black frame insertion, sometimes that will introduce more lag on the video side. So what you want, if you are getting lip sync, is a situation where the audio is coming out before the video.
Right.
Because almost all AV receivers and AV processors do have an audio delay setting. It's in milliseconds typically, but they will let you delay the audio inside the AV processor. So as long as it's the audio preceding the video, you can manually fix that.
Right. So he says when looking at the specs for fan noise for projectors, what is considered quiet? What sort of number should be looking for if he doesn't want to hear the fan while watching a movie? And if he's watching HDR, will that mean a higher fan noise and potentially shorter bulb life? That's a bunch of different questions. As far as the noise is concerned, it could be the loudest projector in the room, but in the world. But if you have it in a hush box or in another room and it's just showing through a window, no, you're not going to hear it. So the answer to your question isn't what is the decibel reading you should be looking for. It's how far away are you sitting from your projector.
But let's assume it's in the room on a ceiling mount, above your head, basically.
But we can't really assume that with Gary. It could be just about anything. I know that we know what his room looks like, but I'm saying, for other people, we can't answer the question without knowing how far away you are from your projector. So assuming that, what kind of decibels should we be looking at, Rob?
Well, the other disclaimer is to say it does depend on your ambient noise levels, right? Some people have more ambient noise in their room than others. We happen to know Gary's room is very, very quiet.
Which is a bigger problem because you can hear more stuff in it. If you have an ambient, 20 dB, 25 dB, 30 dB noise in your house or near your apartment, you're not going to hear stuff that somebody else might.
So for most people's rooms, anything below 30 decibels is probably going to be right around the ambient noise floor level anyway. If you find one that's about 27 decibels of fan noise, that's going to be considered quiet. Not silent, but it's going to be quiet. Regardless of the situation, 27 decibels is quiet. If you find one that's 23 or lower, that's getting down to silent. That's getting down to you're just not going to hear it if it's any distance away from you. Because even a well-constructed quiet room is still going to have around 20 decibels of just ambient noise floor. So, get down to 23 or lower.
Once you turn on whatever you're watching, too, whatever sound comes out of it, there's an ambient, I want to say, we'll call it ambient noise floor. You might hear the fan when you're in pitch silent scenes.
Absolute silence, right?
Most movies have some sort of noise going through the entire movie. So, I don't know.
Yeah, 27 is definitely quiet regardless, and then below 23, almost utterly silent.
But does HDR make a difference? I mean, I don't
usually
know
it does. Most do default into the high lamp mode, once
Right.
you start watching HDR, because they're just you need that peak light output.
Yeah.
So you'll
Which means
see
you need to move more air across the bulb so you can, or
yeah.
around the bulb.
So
you
a
can
lot of projectors, you will see that there's a range. It'll say, the fan noise ranges from 25 to 32. So 25 is when you're in the low lamp mode, and 32 is when you're in the high lamp mode.
And that will shorten your bulb's life.
Yes, going into the high lamp mode definitely does reduce the lifespan of the bulb as well. So yeah, watching a ton of HDR most likely will mean higher fan noise and a shorter bulb life. Now, a lot of them you can still manually say, I don't care, I know I'm watching HDR, stick with the low lamp mode. You're not going to get the bright highlights that way, but what a lot of people are doing is they're like, we know on a projector we're not going to get 1,000 nits anyway, we're actually going to get something more like 100 nits if we went full bore. So what I really care about with a projector is the wider color, and I'm not even going to worry about the brighter highlights. So a lot of people are using, on the Oppo players or on the Panasonic players, they have a strip metadata feature, which says play HDR out of the player, but get rid of the flag that says go into HDR mode. That lets you keep the wider color, but it gets rid of the extra peak brightness. So there's plenty of options. If you want to keep it in low lamp mode, you can.
All right. Gary spoke with his installer, who is probably getting calls from that dude every day, who suggested a JVC RS520, which is the same as the X77 770, excuse me. Gary's also been asking around, and most of the rumors are that nothing revolutionary is expected for projectors at CEDIA this year, only evolutionary. So we think we should try to hold out with this Runco until 2018, maybe a genuine 4K. Resolution models will be available for less than 10 grand next year. Should he buy a JVC E-Shift model right now, or should he wait for this year's CEDIA and decide then how much of a benefit is genuine 4K over E-Shift? From what I remember from the reports that we've read, the genuine difference between genuine 4K over E-Shift is, not zero,
right?
But isn't all that much.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. The answer to this question is you should just be fine with getting the E-Shift and go on with your little life, and that's be fine. But this is not the answer to Gary's question, because we're answering Gary. We're not answering for everybody else. Everybody else, buy E-Shift.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. Gary, you should wait. You should wait for as long as you can possibly hold out. Before, because I think every day you wait, every trade show that comes along is going to introduce cheaper and cheaper 4K alternatives. If you can wait a year or two, I think you would be very happy with what you got. You'll be able to save a lot of money that way. Get yourself a 4K, genuine 4K. These evolutionary things is where you want to start buying. You don't want to buy in the revolutionary, because those are expensive, and they're going to be outclassed in a couple of years. Why buy something today? It's the same thing with cars, right? Why do I always do the car thing? Let me think of something else. It's the same thing with motorcycles.
Different.
So different. It's the first time they come out with a product, everything's brand new. And they are trying to make everything work as best they can. And every time they go back and they put out a new model, they're refining that. They're making it cheaper. They're making it better. They're making it brighter. They're making it, the black levels better. They're going to make it a little bit better. They have the potential of doing that for less money every iteration. If you can wait a year or two, I think you're going to be much happier with the money you spent than if you spend it right now.
I say wait at least till CEDIA, because CEDIA is not very far away. CEDIA is in September.
Yeah, it's next month.
So when they announce whatever they announce, once those models become available, typically in November, it means the current models are going to go on clearance.
Right.
Now, if this is all true, and what's happening at CEDIA is just going to be an evolution where it's a slight spec bump or something like that.
Right.
That means you're going to be able to pick up an RS520 at a discount in November or December. So it's like, if that was good enough to buy, you might as well get it when it's on clearance. If the newest model is barely any better anyway, why pay full price for it? And that, with Gary's type of budget, that he could replace that in 2 to 3 years. If it's under $5,000, which it's gonna be, when it goes on clearance, then you can look at potentially replacing that with a genuine 4K model in only 2 to 3 years from now, with the type of budget that Gary can afford. So I say wait till at least CEDIA, wait till the clearance, and evaluate then.
Yeah. He says if he goes for, I kind of feel like he's already bought a projector.
Yeah.
But if he goes for a JVC, is the RS620, which is the same as the X970, worth the higher price over the RS520? They claim slightly higher contrast and light output due to hand-selected parts, but the specs are otherwise identical. We've talked about this before, haven't we? I don't really think there's anything different between these two.
No, and I'll bet you dollars to donuts you can find specific RS520 models that are every bit as good as every single RS620 model because they happen to get some good parts in that, you know. So supposedly the 520 is the more like mass-produced one, and the 620 is like the, you know, hand-selected parts.
That hand-selected, that just, you know what that screams custom installer dealer stuff. That's just marketing for this one has a nicer case.
Give us something that we can sell at a higher price.
Yeah.
For no real reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
I would bet that the guts of this thing are if they're not identical, they are so close to identical that it's immaterial.
Yeah, like from the 420 to the 520, there's an appreciable difference. The 520 has a whole other color filter in it, so you can get the wider color gamut. So, you know, there's an obvious difference between those two models. From the 520 to the 620, it's like, I think that's a little bit of marketing hogwash, to be honest.
Lastly, and this is H, so I was wrong. NHK in Japan still insists that they would provide 8K content in 2020. Clearly, that would require 8K displays, but quite a few Ultra HD Blu-ray reviews point out how a lot of current movies aren't even truly 4K. How they use a digital intermediate that is only 2K or slightly higher than 2K. So, would there be any point to an 8K disc format? No. But and what about something like Dunkirk that's shot on actual film that Nolan says is closer to an 18K equivalent? Would that still be down converted even at 8K? Dude, no one's going to have 8K. I mean, I want to say that, was it 2020 or 2017? No. 3 years? They're still trying to get 4K displays in people's houses. 3 years they are not introducing 8K displays on a mass scale. Right. I just don't see it. I can see it being a thing that is available to the very well-heeled. Yeah, I mean, this is Japan, where, you know, people apparently have a lot more access to. They are very technologically savvy, and honestly, they have really small houses, and they probably sit really close to their stuff. They might be able to enjoy the benefits of 4K over 1080p, whereas here in America, with our big old great rooms, you could fit like, you know, a bajillion people in them, and you're sitting 75 feet away from a 50-inch display. You're like, I don't see the difference. I'm like, I know you don't. This is sure, it's going to be available. They will show. I think baseball's big over there, right?
They're going to have one of those big, you know, on the side of a building displays that's, you know, an 8K. And yes, they just want to broadcast 8K so they can say they did it. I mean, NHK still will not let go of their 22.2 channel-based audio system. They will not let it go, even though we now have object-based audio that can scale to the number of speakers in use. They won't let go of it. So, yeah, eventually, once we have a whole bunch of 8K content at some point, then an 8K disc format would make sense. But until we have a bunch of content. Think of how big your screen would have to be for 8K to make a difference. Yeah. Just think about it, dude. I mean, no, it's just not important. No. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant. Now go out and listen to something.